What in God's name were those championship games yesterday? AFC title, the Kansas City Chiefs going to yet another Super Bowl, and now it's the San Francisco 49ers about to join them. We're going to debate all of that. My guest today is someone we are all familiar with. It's Jake Asman. Finally a switcheroo here. Finally he's jumping on my show after the entire season of me jumping on his. So very excited to have him back on. So let's get it rolling.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
All right, everybody, welcome back inside Football with Faria. We got a lot to get to today, but first, let's go right in, dive in. Welcome our guest to the show, Jake Asman. Jake, it's a big switcheroo here on this Monday.
Nick, it feels weird, but it also feels normal. It's great to be back with you on the other side.
No, definitely. Appreciate you jumping on. I'm glad we could get you on early in this process. The show is still new. For those of you guests that want to ask Jake a question, you guys can call in on the link button below on YouTube, or just ask a question here in the comment section. We already have a few debates going on right now, but Jake, I'll ask you right away because I was stunned at how just crazy the conference championships were yesterday. I'm sure you watched those games. What were your immediate takeaways from those two games yesterday?
Well, the first game to me was, wow, is Patrick Mahomes that good? And we are stupid if we ever doubt this guy. I can't wait to bet the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Spoiler alert, I like them 2 weeks from yesterday. And then, you also obviously have to talk about what happened with Lamar. I thought he played a terrible second half. And, then you look at the second game, and it shows you even like the great coaches in the league, they still screw up. Like Dan Campbell, he saw himself, long enough out there doing his thing where he actually became the villain after he was America's darling all throughout the season. So the whole dynamic of these two games, so many different storylines, and really like coaching and quarterback play remains as important as ever. And honestly, you look at the AFC, everyone's still chasing Patrick Mahomes until someone actually beats the guy.
We've never seen, and you look at the numbers and the comparison between him and Tom Brady, we've never seen a quarterback have this kind of success this early on in his career. Like, as good as Brady was, he missed the playoffs his second year as a starter. They went 9-7. They didn't make it in 2002. They lost in the divisional round in 2005 after securing the dynasty. There were plenty of playoff moments where Brady just wasn't enough. The team wasn't enough and everything else. And they've been to the Super Bowl now 4 times in the last 5 years. That is just absurd. You can put Andy Reid in the Hall of Fame. That's pretty much guaranteed. I think it's very fair to say that, Patrick Mahomes already, he's not even 30 yet. He's in the Hall of Fame right now if he retires tomorrow.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, he's on a like GOAT path right now. Like, it's crazy to say, but every year he has started in the NFL, he's made it to at least an AFC title game. He's about to play in his 4th Super Bowl. If he wins, he would already have 3 rings before the age of 30. I mean, we're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and he's played 6 seasons. I mean, it's that crazy, but the numbers don't lie, and then the eye test doesn't lie as well. We've seen all these other quarterbacks along the way have a great year, but then when they play Mahomes, the only guy that's been able to beat him in a championship game is Brady and Joe Burrow. And that's it. He's beaten everyone else, and that's kind of crazy when you say that out loud.
Well, the other piece of this, and I do want to bring up, we're definitely starting with the Chiefs-Ravens game, but the one thing that I wrote about this morning on Sports Illustrated was the fact that Lamar Jackson, as great as he is, and he's on his way to winning 2 MVP awards before, he's 27 years old, 2 MVP awards. No player in NFL history has done that. But when you look at his overall skill set and you look at the overall tape, he was horrific in that game, just absolutely horrific. One of the big, probably I would argue the biggest problem that the Ravens had was their inability to throw the ball, and whether we can debate of if it was coaching, if it was Lamar just not reading the defense. There has to be a question now regarding Jackson's viability as a franchise quarterback that can get you to a Super Bowl? No, because Josh Allen has performed well against Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow, you've already said it, beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson has been in these situations before and has looked terrible in most of these games.
It's clearly a thing. Like the Lamar lovers could describe it any way they want. He has earned the right with how good he's been, Nick, to be held to high standards. Like we expect more from a now 2-time MVP to be better than 2-4 in the playoffs. We expect more from a 2-time MVP when you're the 1 seed playing at home to be able to generate more than 10 points. Like the Ravens defense did its job. Like they shut out the city in the second half. Like the Chiefs got off to that fast start. Ravens adjusted. The game was there if the MVP could will them to a win. And sure, the Todd Monken play calling you could question with the amount of times they threw versus run, but there are guys open and he missed guys. So as great as Lamar is, he's going to have a playoff narrative that he can't play well in the big game until he plays well in some big games. He's going to have to break through.
The one comparison I have, because he is a scrambling quarterback, he's a guy that can operate with his legs. But the one thing that I look at, and I again talk about it as an Eagles fan, Jalen Hurts walked into the Super Bowl against that same defense. There's very little changes on that defense. Arguably, the defense was worse yesterday because they didn't have Willie Gay, the linebacker that was going to be the spy for Lamar Jackson. So all of that being said, and most people would argue that Jalen Hurts is not a better quarterback than Lamar Jackson, but Jalen stood up and played well in the Super Bowl against this same Chiefs team. Lamar, as bad as he played and as bad as the play calling was, it was pretty shocking overall, to say the least. And I think that there has to be some questions. Listen, Joe Flacco, Jets fans kind of love him with all the issues that he had those couple of years. He got the Ravens to a Super Bowl championship, and he beat Tom Brady in order to do it. This is kind of where we are now with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, it's a fact. How can you deny it, right? I mean, I'll go as far as to say his career is more like James Harden than any other quarterback in the league right now, right? I mean, James Harden's got multiple MVPs and all-star appearances, and he's got a knack for not winning the big game or playing well in the playoffs, and that's kind of Lamar right now. I mean, the numbers are drastic. Like, you say whatever you want about Josh Allen. Josh Allen's playoff numbers are outstanding. His quarterback rating is over 100. He has had some unbelievable playoff performances, even in some of the games Buffalo has lost. You can't say that with Lamar. Like, look at the games they've lost. He's been a big reason as to why Lamar's never had a game as good as what Allen did in Kansas City a few years ago, where they lost, at the end with 13 seconds to go in regulation to force OT. Like, Lamar's been bad in these games, and until he gets over that, Nick, that's going to follow him. And I don't want to say he can never get over it. Like, Peyton Manning had that knock on him at the beginning of his career as well. He was 0-3 in his first 3 playoff games. But until Lamar breaks through, the discourse about him this week is fair because he was not good in that second half when that game was winnable.
We're on Football with Faria. Nick Faria here with Jake Asman of ESPN Radio. Jake, we talked about the Ravens and Chiefs game, Chiefs going to another Super Bowl. But I think the crazy side of things happened in that last game, the NFC title game. Lions go up 24-7. The 49ers charge all the way back, end up winning the game, going to another Super Bowl, second time in 5 seasons. But the big story of that second half, to me, was the absolute buffoonery of Dan Campbell. He took and went for it on 4th down twice, and he failed both times. And the biggest problem with that was he was in field goal range both times. So he took 6 points off the board, and the Lions end up losing by 3. Your initial thoughts from that game?
Coaching malpractice. And I get it. The Lions love to go for it on 4th down and be aggressive, but there needs to be a time and feel for these type of things. Like, if you got a chance to make a game 3 scores once again, you do it. If you got a chance to tie a game late and kind of slow down some of the momentum, you do it. Like, I don't believe in we got to do what got us here. Like, time and place, man. You're on the road in the playoffs. Like, you're in the process of having a historic collapse in these games. I thought Campbell really let down his team yesterday. I did. I know it wasn't the only reason why they lost. The Gibbs fumble killed them. The drops by Reynolds, etc., were brutal. But man, like I'd be crushed today if I were a Lions fan because you were the better team. You had the game.
You
and
played better than them. I agree.
You handed them the game, and that would kill me inside as a Lion fan if I was still alive at this point.
My biggest problem with the whole thing, and yes, the Gibbs fumble was big. You mentioned the Reynolds drops. All of that was huge. But he took 6 points off the board.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a head coach, and the perfect example I have when you're going up against a juggernaut like this is Doug Peterson against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. It was full tilt, fire, score as many points as you possibly can, as quick as you can. This was just reckless abandonment of any principle of any coaching staff. And people, the analytical side of football is defending the moves. You do you do what brought you there. But it's such a stupid mindset because when you look at what got them there, it was an offense that put up a lot of points. It wasn't guys that just dropping passes and fumbling and everything else, but it was Campbell understanding the situations. I mean, this was, to me, the biggest takeaway of the entire conference weekend because you had the Lions who looked like a Super Bowl team for most of that game. Even when San Francisco was crawling back, they were moving the football on that defense. Down, up and down the field. Even with the drops, they were still looking great. And the head coach quite literally said, I know we need points. We're not going to take it. I'd rather go for the touchdown than the field goal. The other piece to this, and I know a lot of people were talking about it on the tweet I sent out today, was people pointed out that the Lions don't have faith in their kicker. Didn't really hit consistently from 40 yards this year, was picked up off the practice squad late in the season. And that blows my mind because if you can't trust your kicker in a playoff scenario, what the heck is he doing on your roster?
100%. I mean, why is he there? Right? Like, and we're not talking about, 55 yarders. If it's between 40 and 45, you got to let your kicker have a shot at it. And then the other thing that Campbell did that was terrible was the running play at the goal line on the last Lions drive, because you have a 4% chance of recovering an onside kick. And when you had to use that last time out there, you put yourself in a spot where even if you ended up scoring like they did, you had a 4% chance of getting the ball back. And that was it. So that was terrible. You had to be passing at all times. And if it's not there, throw it out of bounds. You couldn't get stopped inbounds like they did. So I thought Campbell really dropped the ball. And it just shows you how hard this job is, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, if Robert Saleh made some of those mistakes,
I'm glad you brought it up.
He'd be tarred and feathered today in Times Square. So even the great coaches struggled this weekend, man. Like, look at, everyone loves Todd Monken and the Ravens. How many times did they run the ball in that game yesterday?
Really
so coaching's hard, man. It's not easy.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Robert Saleh because I kind of went, I don't want to say viral, but a lot of people were tweeting and quote tweeting and debating my tweet yet today about if Robert Saleh was in that situation. And quite frankly, I agree with you. If Robert Saleh is there and he decides to not kick the field goal in both of those scenarios, he's probably being pushed to be fired the next day. Maybe even he is fired because New York City media is a lot different than Detroit media. But I fully expect, and you can disagree with me if you want, Jake, I fully expect if Robert Saleh made that call, the analytical people would have disagreed with him unlike anything we've ever seen because it's the Jets. Because it's the math says it's okay to go for it, but Robert Saleh should know better. He's got to kick the field goal here.
He would get tarred and feathered. I'm just saying. Now, look, I could easily say, well, the Jets with Robert Saleh are never going to be in a championship game, so we'll never know what would have happened. And Campbell did a great job, but watching these games, man, it just shows you, like, it's hard. It is hard to win these playoff games. Like, coaching is really heightened when you're talking about do or die games like what we saw yesterday on Championship Sunday.
Send us your comments throughout the show. We're going to be going on for another 30 to 45 minutes here on Football with Faria. We're here with ESPN host Jake Asman. And Jake, already some people are saying, good to see you, brother. Nick and Jake Asman together on Monday. What more could a Jets fan want? What a guest indeed. Jake, you're I think, the second guest I've had on this program. Very much appreciated for you being able to jump on.
I'm thrilled, baby. It's Football with Faria. We got the nice intro at the beginning. I mean, it's happening.
Gator, once again, gets full credit for that. Absolutely incredible. couple other comments here from Johnny. Can't front. I could see Nick and Jake have their own show, like a Green and Goalie show. Jake, I'm just waiting for that announcement to come on for ESPN.
Me too, man. I mean, people think I like, oh, when are you on ESPN radio next? If I knew, I'll share. I don't have the answers right now.
So let's actually talk about those same Jets that we were kind of teasing earlier today. The one thing that I wanted to say, and the one thing I wanted to debate, because again, Jet fans, there's obviously the ultra aggressive, there's the ultra passive, and there's some people that are right smack dab in the middle. Myself being the reporter, I've always tried to fit on that middle ground. But when it comes to the Jets, and it comes to this Jets offense, from the games that we saw in the conference championship to what the Jets offense was this year, night and day. But that doesn't mean they're too far off. Jake, I'll ask you, first question here. How far are the Jets from reaching the Super Bowl next year or in a couple years?
Well, on one hand, they're not that far away if you tell me Aaron Rodgers is back to being, a top 10 quarterback. Because as we've seen, like look at the AFC, the last two quarterbacks standing where Lamar Jackson is going to win an MVP and Patrick Mahomes, who, as we talked about at the top, is on his way to maybe being the greatest quarterback ever. So you have the quarterback. I have major questions about this coach, but you also have a really good defense that's coming back. And it's going to really depend on the offseason. I would say right now the Jets are far because they don't have a good O-line. And right now they only have one legitimate stud wide receiver and a couple other like complementary pieces that you could live with. But with a strong offseason and Rodgers being Rodgers, you're not that far if you got the quarterback. So it's a complex answer. I know a lot of Jet fans are going to say, we're never going to get there. But, I mean, we just watched the Texans go from the worst team in the NFL record-wise the last 3 years to the divisional round of the playoffs. Like, you get the quarterback playing at a high level, it kind of makes everything else look a lot better. So I look at this Jets team that won 7 games with the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. And if you tell me Rodgers is back to playing like a top 10 guy with this defense, I think they're at least a playoff team. And then you got to get hot in the playoffs. And it's not going to be easy to beat the Chiefs as we continue to see, but you're not that far away if that scenario presents itself. So really, to me, it comes down to what's your confidence level Rodgers is still Rodgers next year. And if it's high, you're not that far away, if that makes sense.
I don't even think that Rodgers needs to be the MVP that he was in the past, because I said this on your show several times this year, where if Rodgers is just a little bit above average, the Jets are probably winning 11 games, 11, 12 games, because as tough as the schedule was, they were close in a lot of these games. The loss to Atlanta, the loss to New England, the loss to the Raiders, even the loss to the Chiefs. I mean, we talk about how far the Jets are from reaching the Super Bowl. The Jets almost beat the Chiefs with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And that was with an offensive line that was solid, but not spectacular. AVT was still in there, and he was helping solidify that offensive line. But they were moving the ball on that great defense for most of that game. And they were moving the ball effectively in some other games. The Houston Texans one comes to mind. They looked good against Philadelphia. This was not an offense that was just atrocious every single game they played. They had spurts where they looked competent. The problem is the 3-4 games that they were competent were followed by 4 in a row where they couldn't pick up a football and block. So ultimately, I don't think they're not that far off at all. I do agree with you that I think a receiver, an offensive line upheaval is coming, and that's certainly going to help. But with Aaron Rodgers, do they even need him to be the MVP to even get to that point? Because I would trust him in a playoff game over Lamar. I would trust the defense in a playoff game against Josh Allen. You take what you can get with Burrow and Mahomes, but those are two quarterbacks. You may not even see them next year if you reach the postseason until the conference championship game itself.
Yeah, you got to get there, though, right? You got to get to the playoffs first, and like that's a big hurdle for a franchise that hasn't done it in 14 years. And you can't expect Rodgers to play 17 games next year. So you got to be prepared if he's got to miss 3 or 4, that you could go 2-2 or 3-1 in that stretch with a really good backup. So there's steps to get to that point. But I'm with you. If you tell me you get to the playoffs next year and Rodgers is your quarterback with this defense, you have a shot. And that's what this team has been missing for far too long. The defense has been top 5 in the league 2 years in a row, even if it takes a slight regression next year, but your offense goes from 32nd to, let's say, 15. you're a 10 or 11 win team. And that's where the Jets need to get to kind of take that next step. And if they don't, they're going to have a new regime coming in because it's time. It's now or never. There's no more mulligans.
Yeah, this is it. And even objectively, when I was on your show, I was saying, if they get to 7-10 this year without Rodgers, that's enough for Saleh and Douglas to be back, because you essentially had a repeat of a previous year without a quarterback. Now this is it. The injury concerns, the injury excuses are not going to be acceptable, because you've had now 2 years to change your practice habits, 2 years to change the strength and conditioning side, the injuries in the preseason, the injuries in practice. You have all this time to change it. And if you don't, the injury excuse no longer matters. Every team gets hurt, but if it's consistently happening under your regime, that's more of that's pretty much telling what's going on with you guys instead of just basic injury luck. And yes, AVT and Joe Tippmann, those guys are going to need to be 100%. But even if they play 16, 15 games next year with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, you have to think that they can compete for an AFC East division title. You have to think that they're going to be a top 3 seed in the conference, because as good as Joe Burrow is, he is more injury prone than we really talk about. Yeah. The Bengals are not guaranteed to get back to the playoffs next year because their division is stacked, and they also might lose a couple of big time receivers that we'll get to in a minute.
Yeah, it's fair too. And I mean, you just look at the AFC landscape, right? I mean, like, Tua was healthy this year. Do we trust him to stay healthy going forward? Lamar was healthy this year. Do we trust him to stay healthy going forward? There's injuries every year. Hopefully the Jets had their catastrophic, devastating Rodgers injury last year, and they could get 17 games of it this upcoming year. But that's really the big question. I mean, a year ago at this time, the biggest questions for quarterbacks were Lamar's health and Tua's health. And ironically, in a year where so many quarterbacks went down, they were like 2 of the only ones that actually played every game and stayed healthy. So there's luck involved in this as well. But if you tell me you get a healthy Rodgers with this defense, assuming Joe Douglas could just take an offensive line that had some terrible injury luck, but can surround it with, a couple of complement pieces, like just be a mediocre O-line with Rodgers, that's good enough with Garrett, with Brees, with this defense. You would think to at least be a playoff team. And we'll see if the rest of the division maybe comes back towards them, because I'm not in love with the Bills' future. I'm not in love with Miami. I think you're asking a lot. I get it, because a lot of people have doubts on Saleh and Douglas after this year, but Rodgers has changed a lot. We're talking about a 7-win team with Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and Trevor Siemian starting all your games. Like, I think Jet fans now maybe are underrating the impact of Rodgers coming back and just being a top 12 quarterback. Forget being an MVP quarterback.
No, I completely agree. It looks like we're kind of having you freeze a little bit, but we got the last piece of your comment there from Aaron Rodgers. And I do agree, because he doesn't need to be this top 5 quarterback anymore, because the talent around him, it's why he wanted to come to New York in the first place, because the defense is elite and still the majority of them are still under contract. And he's got young talent that can blossom into stars, Wilson and Hall. But I do want to ask as a follow-up, if there's one move that you want to see the Jets make this offseason, just one move, is it for T. Higgins? Is it for a trade for Devontae Adams? Is it to trade up for Joe Walt and essentially trust whoever's in the receiving core with Rodgers at quarterback? What's the one move you feel the Jets cannot miss this offseason?
Man, I'll tell you what, if you guarantee me T. Higgins, I would take that. I think putting him with Garrett Wilson would be awesome. I mean, some of the other stuff I want, like, I really don't want to trade up for Alt or for Shanu. I'm hoping one of them could be there at 10 and you don't have to do anything. As far as like the other offensive linemen that could be available in free agency, none of them are like that great. Like, if you tell me Tyron Smith's going to play 17 games next year, sure, sign me up for him to be the left tackle. But, the most he's played the last couple of years was this year. He played 13. You tell me they could get that bona fide stud receiver locked in, spend the rest of the money on offensive line and offensive line depth, use pick 10 on another offensive lineman, I think you feel pretty good about this team with this defense in place. So if you guarantee me the stud receiver, whether it's Pittman or we already mentioned Higgins, or I doubt Mike Evans is available, but we'll throw him in there. You get me one of those guys, I feel pretty good about at least the direction this team is headed towards the draft.
So let me bring this up, put you on the hot seat here. We obviously expect them to take an offensive lineman, but if a guy like Malik Neighbors is available at 10, if Ashanu and Alt are both taken, do you run to the table for Neighbors, or do you trade out and get an offensive lineman later on, whether it's Fuaga, whether it's Latham. It's the complexity of this offseason. But ultimately, the Jets are kind of in a good situation here because they can essentially go receiver or offensive line and solidify a major problem that they had last year.
I think I would prefer the trade down route because I keep hearing how great the offensive line class is.
Yeah.
And I would love to recoup that second round pick if possible. But I'm not also going to sit here and kill the Jets if one of the tackles they love is there and they stick and pick. Like, they got to get it right. As long as they get it right, no complaint from me. But I think in a perfect world, you are moving down, recouping a second round pick, and still taking an offensive lineman in round one. Now, you bring up the receivers. I love Malik Neighbors. I would be very tempted, but I think so much of what the Jets do at pick 10 is contingent on what they had already done in free agency. So I think by the end of March, we'll have a pretty good idea what the plan will be with that number 10 pick. I think it's on the Jets to go into the draft without any obvious holes, so they can't get leapfrog like what looked like happened last year with the trade down to that, the Patriots made to move up and deal with the Steelers so they could come in front of the Jets and take Roderick Jones.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, and a lot of people were arguing and still are angry about that trade, but I always argue and say the pick swap was necessary because the pick swap got you Aaron Rodgers. It's just unfortunate that Jones fell to the Patriots when he did, and you weren't going to jump them for a draft pick because you didn't have a lot of draft picks last year. You don't have a lot of draft picks this year. So I understand that there's people that are frustrated that they missed out on that offensive lineman, because by all accounts, Jones looks like a very solid player. But do you want Broderick Jones over Aaron Rodgers? That doesn't make sense to me. You can't ask for both things. My wife's birthday is today. You can't have the cake and eat it too at the same time, particularly for me. I'm on a diet. I'm trying to lose weight.
You look good.
See, it's what happens. You cut off the soda, you get a haircut, you shave a little bit, you look presentable as you go into a job search. It's essentially what we're working for here. It's essentially what we're working for. We got a couple questions here, though, for you, Jake. Seeing one, where is this? From Peter. Projected quarterback room for 2024. We know Rodgers is back. We don't know what's going to happen with Zach Wilson, although by all accounts he's gone. Who's the third quarterback? A lot of these questions still up in the air. Jake, your opinion.
I hope the backup is Jacoby Brissett. That is my preference. And then I'm on board with the draft the day 3 guy and let that guy be QB3. And you never know. I'm not saying that guy's going to be, Brock Purdy or that guy's going to be Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins, but it's time the Jets take more dart throws at the quarterback spot. Chances are that guy's more likely to be Bryce Petty than Brock Purdy, but you know what? At least you tried. And if you can invest a 5th or a 6th round pick in a day 3 guy, I'm on board with that. Let the guy sit for a couple of years. And that, to me, is how you kind of round out your quarterback room.
We're here on Football with Faria with ESPN host Jake Asman. You guys got a question for Jake? Send it here in the chat. You guys want to call in? The link is there on the YouTube description below. Talking about the projected quarterback room for 2024 for these New York Jets. And I do agree. I think Jacoby Brissett is probably the top target for a lot of people and a lot of different teams. Quality backup, has played as a starter, has looked really good as a backup in the past. Even with Washington, he looked good when he came in relief in that Jets game. But the name that I look at is Gardner Minshew for a number of different reasons. And yes, having him is kind of maybe not on the same stratosphere, but kind of like Tim Tebow, where mustache mania, Minshew mania, all that stuff is going to be excited. But he's a competent starter. He got Indianapolis to 9 wins this year and a Colts team that just wasn't that good to begin with. Yes, he had a solid play caller in Shane Steichen. With Minshew, with Brissett, with all of these different guys, I think it's pretty clear that Joe Douglas, on his essentially last breath of his general managership here with the Jets, he is not going to let the same thing happen. He is going to address the backup quarterback role, something he did not do last year, whether it was by ownership telling him not to spend more money or just by his own choice of quite frankly, buffoonery in and of itself.
Better not. I mean, he's lucky to be employed right now, Nick. Let's be real. Like if Rodgers got hurt in week 10 or week 11, they might have a new coach, new GM right now. Who knows? So it's one of those things where you would think the Jets would look to solve that immediately when the new league year starts. Like offer Brissett, 2-year deal, make him the highest paid backup in the NFL, get it done. Minshew, I'm on board with that. Tannehill, I would listen. Tyrod, I would listen. Like, that to me is a no-brainer. Get it done, and let's not think about it anymore.
Probably one of the first moves that they're going to make right off the bat, I would say, in free agency. Jake, we have a question for you, and it's going to put you on the spot. From Boomtown, Jake, who are your top 3 favorite super fans of the Jake Asman Show? Put him on the spot. Well done.
Man, this is tough. Boomtown will put you in there because I'm going to pander to you. Let's see. We got Hater in here. Who else is? We'll put Hater in there, and then we'll put Rich in there because those are the 3 most recent comments that I saw that I recognize from the Jake Asman Show. So there you go. Those are the top 3 super fans as we pander to the live audience.
One more question. This one actually for me, Nick. Are you going to the Senior Bowl? Rich, great question. Unfortunately, I am not. My expectation was that I would, and up until December 18th, I was certainly planning on it. But unfortunately, the funds and still looking for a job, that's going to unfortunately change my plans. We got a new caller in here. It is Johnny. We're going to add Johnny to the stage. How's it going, Johnny?
What's up, guys? What's up, Jake? What's up, Nick? I come through, show some love real quick. Jake, I hope I was number 1 on your top 3 fanatics that call in.
Probably you were not. You didn't make the list. You were not. you weren't in the 3 most recent comments. So I only pandered to the 3 most recent ones I saw.
Hey, I was gonna ask a question for both of you guys. I keep seeing that we're having salary cap issues, right? And with that being said, what are the moves? I mean, if the cap is a big hinder for us, which I don't believe there's a such thing as a cap because we have other teams that consistently do some off-the-wall stuff and get all these players to come back. But if that is the case, who are the players you think that are not going to be on the team coming up next year? And who are the players that we should bring into the team if we lose like a CJ Mosley or I don't know, a CJ who's Ozama, et cetera. Just wanted to.
Johnny, thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Jake, what do you think?
Well, I think they could create a decent amount of cap space with restructures, some releases. So I'm not as worried about that. You know, I've heard some people float out the idea of like trading DJ Reed, and I'm vehemently against that. Like, this is an all-in window right now. Like, we'll go for it. Like, cap space be damned in 2026. I'll worry about that then. Like, they have a finite amount of time to try and win with this core. I don't want to weaken the defense. Like, the one thing about this defense, they've been remarkably healthy the last 2 years compared to the offense. I don't want to like put my good health to the test next year. Oh, we're fine. We got Michael Carter and Sauce Gardner. Well, you lose one of them. I think you would be thrilled if you had DJ Reed in case, God forbid, something happened to Sauce. So I just think you want to try and keep as much of this core together as possible. There's ways they could create cap space without having to jettison members from this defense.
Yeah, I think that's going to be, and it's a great call by Johnny. Great question, because I think right now they don't really have a lot of cap space, and there's not going to be a lot of returning going into the 2024 offseason. The easy restructures are going to be Lake and Tomlinson, CJ Mosley, those guys that just have absurd cap hits for who they are right now. I will say, if there's a surprise release, if there's a surprise June 1st cut, I would certainly circle CJ Mosley as one of those guys. And the only reason I say that is because I think he sort of didn't really play great down the stretch. Jamie Sherwood, the late round pick from a couple of years ago, did. And I think his development overall could push CJ Mosley out the door maybe a little earlier. Do I expect that to happen this offseason? No, but I wouldn't be surprised, essentially, is what I'm saying. So the top 2 guys that I'm looking at, Mosley, Tomlinson, they're going to get restructures. There's going to be other restructures coming. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers is going to take some form of pay cut as well, especially if it means bringing in a guy like T. Higgins or trading for Devontae Adams. One of those things is bound to happen. But when I look at it, I haven't seen Jets cap issues overall. I just haven't seen it. Most of the stuff that I've seen is, okay, what does this team need to improve on? And it's pretty clear. Receiver, offensive line, everything else. But they're clearly well-positioned to be aggressive this offseason, whether it's receiver, whether it's offensive line. From Hater, my apologies. On a more serious note, Joe D has his work cut out for him to start 2 to 4 offensive linemen and got to come away with Brissett, Minshew, Taylor, or Tannehill in that order. LFG Hater, thank you for the comment. Is Ryan Tannehill the best backup possible with all these coaches from Tennessee now joining the Jets?
I mean, that's why his name keeps getting mentioned as much as it does. To that, I'd say, all right, if we're going to recreate the 2019 Titans, we make Mike Vrabel the head coach because he's available, you know?
But here's the thing, though, and this is from what there's several different reports that I've heard that Vrabel rubbed people the wrong way in the interview process this year. Maybe he needs a year to just sort of stay away from everything, be a defensive consultant. There's very few coaches out there in the coaching pool that have had the pedigree that Mike Vrabel had. There's very few people like Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick doesn't have a job. So this coaching tree, the Parcells-Belichick coaching tree, it very well could be on its last legs. I think the only one left is Brian Daboll? And that's not exactly, solid ground right now with the Giants either.
And Dable also has like some Saban in there, and he was like with a bunch of different guys. Like the true Belichick coaching guys, like most of them were like either really, really bad or stunningly mediocre. Like Vrabel never even coached with Bill. Like he played for him, but he's more of an O'Brien or Urban Meyer guy. If we're going to be like technical with the coaching tree. Honestly, if you think about it, Bill O'Brien, the head coach, had a winning record, won a couple division titles. That's probably the crowning example of like the Belichick coaching tree, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Hater, another comment here for you, Jake. Let me make sure I get this one. I almost clicked the wrong one. I've been with you since you had less a lot with 100,000 subs, bro. LFG, Jets. Jake, I do want to ask you, because I obviously jumped in very, very early in this process. It's actually been less than a year. What has been the most surprising thing to you since you started your own show, since you joined ESPN, you were down in Houston? What has been the biggest surprise to you throughout all of this? Just all the fans coming on and joining you, the support overall. You had a great event at the main event, that bar out on Long Island. What has been the biggest surprise for you?
That's a great question. It's been the biggest surprise, I guess, just the reach of the fan base on YouTube, because it's unbelievable. I think it speaks volumes to just the passion that the Jet fan has. Like, there's not that many NFL teams that have as many content creators on YouTube like the Jets do. Like, you follow the Giants, they don't have nearly as many YouTubers with a huge following. You look at some of the other teams, like I know you cover the Eagles, you could speak to it. Like, there's a couple of accounts I've seen, but it just feels like the rabid fan base that is the Jets, so many people get their coverage through YouTube. I can't think of that many fan bases that have like this many channels that all have tons of subscribers and viewers. So it's just a testament to how great the Jet fans truly are. And I'll say a line I've said a lot on my show: the Jet organization doesn't deserve the Jet fan base, because this fan base is special. And we saw what happened with Detroit this year, how loud it got for their playoff games. And like, I promise you, MetLife will be as loud as any building in the country if the Jets could ever get a home playoff game. It was on September 11th this past year when they played the Bills on opening night. I was there. But you take that energy for a home playoff game for the first time in over 20 years, that will be something, man. So I'm hoping I get to see it at some point.
The one thing that I'll say, and because I come from the Eagles background and I see everyone, and I've listened to all these fans, the one difference that I have with Jets and Eagles fans, and they're both loyal, they're both passionate, they're both massive. They will support any content creator that they feel is worthy enough to be followed. The Jets fans don't deserve what the Jets organization does to them. Eagle fans, in my opinion, do. Because I am just, this entire offseason, just the last month and a half has just been atrocious for Philadelphia, to the point where I would argue that the last month has been even worse for Eagle fans than Jets fans. Because would Jet fans sign up for a hot start? You're essentially signing up for the 2008 season again. Hot start, fall flat down the stretch, and then get blown out in the playoff game. I know the 08 team didn't make the playoffs, but Eagle fans deserve kind of this because of the vitriol that they throw at athletes, at the front office, and everything else. The front office has given them a Super Bowl. The Jets fans haven't been given a playoff appearance in the last decade. You tell me who deserves one more, specifically when people are starting to attack their own quarterback in Jalen Hurts like that. It's blown me away, and it's actually had me appreciate Jet fans more. Not saying I'm turning into a Jets fan. That's not what I'm saying. But I appreciate Jet fans more now because they are far more realistic with their team and not demanding a Super Bowl appearance every freaking year.
We put up with a lot, Nick. I mean, you got to be a special kind of sport fan to be like a diehard Jet fan, right? Because you don't see much winning. There's no such thing as a bandwagon Jets fan. So it's like I'd kill to have the Eagles' recent history, man. You win a Super Bowl,
yeah.
then you change coaching staffs, you go to another Super Bowl, you have a franchise quarterback in place. Like, man, I'd kill to be the Eagles. I'll tell you that much. I know the year ended terribly and they were 10-1 and they fell apart. I get all that, but man, like the discourse with the Eagles, like I see you respond to it on Twitter all the time. I know some people that do sports radio there. It's pretty wild, man. We would gladly trade places if any Philadelphia Eagle fan is listening.
Of course. And this is what blows me away. Like they've beaten Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. They've beaten Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. You go toe-to-toe. You have your franchise quarterback go toe-to-toe with the best modern quarterback in history. Go toe-to-toe and arguably outplayed him for most of that game. And we're trying to get rid of him and the coach after an 11-6 year because they essentially ran out of gas in the league's toughest schedule. What are we doing here? It's just it blows my mind. And again, like I said, it's further appreciation for Jet fans and what you guys have to deal with. I do want to start and go back to some of these questions pertaining to the Jets offseason. I know we've got a few more minutes left with you, Jake. But this one comes from J Mags. Did we talk free agent running backs yet? Long list this offseason. And he's right. There's a ton of guys. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift. In your mind, do they even need another running back at this point?
They need someone, but not like $7 million into a Dalvin Cook type of running back. Like if you could get Devin Singletary he signed for $2.5 million with the Texans this past year. Find that type of back because you drafted Izzy to be a player for you. You got to give him an opportunity. You don't say, hey, you're RB2 no matter what. Bring in a veteran and then have your running back room be Breece, Izzy, and that veteran. But I'm not spending, big bucks on Saquon or Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs. That doesn't really fit the timeline for the Jets right now. That wouldn't make sense. But I think given the fact that it's a really good running back class, take advantage of that and see if you can get a guy for under $4 million that can make a difference in your backfield.
The one thing that I'll say with that, because the Dalvin Cook signing came in late, obviously in the offseason. It was more to do in case Breece Hall wasn't ready to start week 1. He wasn't 100% to begin the year. And he essentially surprised the coaching staff with how well he looked in that first game against the Buffalo Bills. And it's they kind of looked at it and said, well, yeah, we still have Dalvin, but we don't really need Dalvin anymore. So what are we going to do? So they were caught between a rock and a hard place. And I get that. $7 million for Dalvin Cook was clearly a miss. Clearly a problem overall. But I think with the shrinking running back free agent offers that they get, I'll bring up this one comment here from Johnny because I do agree. With Tony Dews now in the building, does this mean you get a 30-year-old Derrick Henry to sort of spell Breece Hall at times as a power back? We may think it's outlandish, and I get it, but he's been in that system before.
What are you paying him,
cheap. Well, it depends on what he wants. I'm not sitting here paying $10 million, but if he understands that he's a 30-year-old back with plenty of tread on his tires, and he goes for $3-4 million, I think that's a fair enough deal. The sort of the Singletary signing, the Miles Sanders contract, I think that's the kind of barometer that I think would fit the Jets well. It's not a massive one. For 1 or 2 years, you can have him be the pounder on the team and essentially give Hall a chance to have more carries out of the backfield as a receiver.
So a couple thoughts. One, the nickname Pounder on the team, objectively hilarious. 2, if you tell me you could get Derrick Henry for $4 million, sure. I think he's going to be looking to get $10 or $11 million easily. He'll want more than the franchise tag.
How many are going to give him $10 million? I don't think there's a single team out there that's going to pay Derrick Henry $10 million.
I don't like. You would have to have a team that like has plenty of cap space that's willing to make that investment on a 1 year deal. Like they're just saying there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal. Like if you overpay for 1 year, Derrick Henry, you could live with it. But I mean, look, if he wants to ring chase with the Jets and take $4 million, oh my God, sign me up for that. But I just don't find that to be realistic.
Let me give you a little glimpse into the future. The Jets go out, spend big on T. Higgins. They bring in Derrick Henry, and your offense is essentially Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, it's not CJ Uzama, Tyler Conklin, Breece Hall, and Derrick Henry in the backfield. That looks like a Super Bowl offense to me with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback.
Yeah,
If the money works right.
Then you draft Brock Bowers at 10, and here we go. We're the dream team, baby.
Are you invested in the Brock Bowers Discord? Because I know a lot of people are in on potentially him going to the Jets at 10. I also think that Fashanu might fall to 10. If Bowers is there and they take him, are you happy with that pick, even if it's best player available?
I would have to see like what the offensive line looked like if they were going to pass on one of the top tackles for a tight end. The more I watch them, at first I was like vehemently against it, and then I actually watched the film. I had a film guy come on my show, Andrew Fialco, who played some clips and really went through his tape on the air. And he's a phenomenal player. Like saying he's a tight end is obviously doing him a disservice because he does so much more than that. But I just don't think the Jets are going to be able to do enough before the draft where I'm going to be sitting there going, yep, take the tight end over shoring up the offensive line. So I'd be very surprised if the Jets themselves did it. And I'd be surprised if they did it and I'd be on the air that night being like, great move. I would be very hesitant for the Jets to be the team to strike gold with a tight end in the top 10, even though, as I said, I know he's more than just your typical tight end. I get that.
We've been talking about the offensive line, Jake. I've only got a couple questions for you left. You've been fantastic on this show. Greatly appreciate you jumping on. By the time training camp opens up, who do you want starting by position along the offensive line?
Left tackle, Olu Fashanu. Left guard, let's say Kevin Zeitler. Center, okay. Joe Tippmann. Right guard, Elijah Vera Tucker. Right tackle, Michael Onwenu will be their free agent signing from the Patriots as their right tackle.
You would be comfortable having two rookies be on the left side for next year?
So who'd be the second rookie?
Is Zeitler not a rookie? I thought he's coming out. No, I'm mixing him up with Zinter, aren't I?
You're talking about Zach Zinter from Michigan. I meant Kevin Zeitler, who's on the Ravens, is their
guard. Right. I'm mixing him up with the Michigan guy. Apologies.
Yep. I'd be good with him too. I don't think I want two rookies starting, but I think if you tell me that you have one rookie starting and then you have, a third round guard that you took that could slide in and when he's ready, I'm okay with that. I mean, Tippmann went from not starting to having to start most of the year because of injuries. So you got to be prepared. The Jets need to operate like they're going to have three guys that are going to get hurt. 3 or 4 guys that are going to go down. Be better prepared than they were this past year with guys that are more durable, because when you go into the year expecting Dwayne Brown and Becton to play every game, you're setting yourself up for failure in the first place.
I get it. I truly believe, and I'm the only reporter that's been saying this, I truly believe Mekhi Becton is potentially going to come back, probably not as a starter, maybe as a swing tackle, but he's going to at least give you some depth there. You've got, potentially Connor McGovern coming back, Wes Schweitzer could come back as well. There are avenues here for the Jets to add to their depth where it's not going to be 13 different offensive linemen getting hurt in one particular offseason. So, Jake, I appreciate you jumping on. Any closing remarks for Jet fans here today? Any sort of rallying cry for you guys going into the offseason? The Super Bowl is 2 weeks away. What's your message to Jet fans here?
Pray that our time is coming. That's all I got. I don't know if it is, but we'll keep praying every day that one day the football gods will bless us.
He's Jake Asman of ESPN Radio. Check out his show every day on YouTube. Jake, you've been a phenomenal guest for me today. I appreciate you jumping on. Always I'm willing to jump on and talk some football with you. Love having you on. Appreciate it, man.
Nick, anytime. And it was fun to be on the other end of this after we did a whole season of you coming on every Wednesday, man. So we'll definitely get you on my show again when big news actually happens. It kind of feels like we're in that holding pattern, but maybe next week it starts to pick up.
Definitely. We got the Senior Bowl coming up, a lot of different stuff going on. Jake, appreciate your time. we are actually going to close off for the day. For you guys that are listening, thank you guys so much. Of course, I think this is the most views we've had on this show so far. Credit to Jake as well. Appreciate everyone jumping on. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We're going to try to get some more guests throughout the week. And remember, we have our film session on Thursday. For everyone here, thank you guys so much. And we'll see you all tomorrow.